Hello, this is Michael Cinco, and I would like to provide an example or a case for how interdisciplinarity works in the workplace. First, my interpretation of interdisciplinarity. I believe it's a combining or involving two or more disciplines, fields of study, technologies, or professions to identify conflicts, create common ground, propose solutions, and solve problems. Put more simply, I believe it's a combining of different skill sets, in this case from a workplace example, to identify recommendations in the hopes of improving an operation or proposing a solution. The specific case I would like to provide as an example would be an audit of college tuition rates. It's something that all of us in this class, to some extent or another, is affected by. So if I wanted to apply interdisciplinarity and the fusion of different skill sets to arrive at a common ground, I would propose an audit of college tuition rates to display that example. And now, what do I mean by that? What disciplines and skill sets are required? Well, for an audit engagement, you need, obviously, as the name implies, a staff of auditors that would plan the engagement, would lay out the scope and depth of the engagement, what time frame they would be reviewing, who they would be talking to, what types of cost would they be considering. Now, with interdisciplinarity and how it works in this particular example, you can't necessarily have an audit staff and those folks that have backgrounds in the audit field or accounting field do all that kind of work. Why? Well, first of all, you need some information technology skills. And the reason for that is those type of personnel are going to be able to help identify pertinent databases and extract sample transactions. In other words, with most of information now and data gravitating from paper to computer-based systems, you need information technology staff to place their electronic hooks into these databases to extract the information that's needed to review. Also, human resources or personnel staff that have the background in working with personnel, with problem employees, with organizational startups. Those folks would be helpful in providing organizational charts and a list of personnel that would be working in those departments that we could potentially want to talk to. They also would be able to help us identify any problem cases where we might have some indicators of fraudulent activity. So they would be able to provide personnel files for people that might have had negative personnel actions against them that could impact what we want to look at. Now, what would these groups of staff members that make up audit, accounting, IT, and human resources backgrounds be able to review, to determine the inputs to tuition rates, rather? Well, obviously, salary would be a big one. The salaries of both administrative and faculty staff. You also have a big component on college campuses of existing buildings and other facility structures, which obviously depreciate over time. Other inputs that factor into tuition rates, utilities to run those facilities and departments, heating, air conditioning, phone, computer usage and power, and contract costs. And by that, I mean there probably is a universe of personal services contracts that are extended to the community at large to perform services on behalf of the university. And by no means is that an all-inclusive list. That might be just some of the top things that these diverse individuals might want to take a look at. You also have the area of new construction. You also have costs associated to supporting athletic programs and facilities, football stadiums, basketball gymnasiums, swimming halls, and the like. And finally, there's also a component that often gets under the radar, but could potentially have a significant effect in a college's expenses, which factor into tuition rates, and that's potential liabilities from any pending litigation that might be against the school as a whole, or a faculty, staff member, or anyone that represents the school at large. So to recap, and to hopefully try to bring home the point of how all this comes together in terms of interdisciplinarity, is the audit process devotes time to planning, where you have your auditors that gather your background information and determine the length and depth of the audit itself. You have the field work, which is your detailed audit testing and walkthroughs of the processes and a review of the policies and procedures, which is done by the auditors with help from the IT personnel as well as the human resources staff. And then finally, the reporting is where it all comes together, where ideally makes the case for how interdisciplinarity works when you put all this information together and prepare an audit report with findings, conclusions, recommendations, and what corrective actions management would take to correct any deficiencies. I hope I've made that case. I believe interdisciplinarity works, and hopefully you do now too.